Hey, Hound Dogs, I'm David Hankins.
I'm Paul Hankins.
And welcome to On the Air with Power Squared. This week we have a special guest, Doug Neff, the author of Epic Win.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah, that's right. We actually have two copies of the book. I bought one from you, I think, when we first met, and then Trevor bought one because he went to one of your classes or your programs at STCC.
Yeah.
And
Well,
did that
thank you for supporting us.
Yeah. We'll get to that later. My first question is, are you happy that Law & Order is back on the air? Because that was
That's right. Yeah. One of my favorite things and my nemesis also, episodes of Law & Order. I've been very happy. It has made its way into our weeknight viewing lineup. Watching the new episodes of Law & Order has been great.
Yeah, we haven't. I watched the first one and I was like a little like these are different people, and I don't know. It was a little.
Yeah, it takes them a little while to find their feet, but you gotta trust that they'll get there.
Yeah, well, they obviously have proven they could do it, but I knew you were a big Law & Order fan. We met at the Comics Creator Connection at San Diego Comic-Con, probably back in, we're guessing like 2014.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And
that was one of the earlier ones we did, I would imagine. I don't have the exact year at the tip of my tongue, but yeah, that would be one of the earliest ones we did.
So how did you get involved with that?
Well, Corey and I had started doing our goal setting workshop at WonderCon and Comic-Con, and we were really enjoying doing that. And we started to notice that if you go to one of these comic conventions and your goal is to find a creative partner, like an artist if you're a writer, or a writer if you're an artist, there aren't any built-in ways to do that. You have to kind of wander the floor and be outgoing enough to introduce yourself to someone, and it's kind of haphazard. And we thought that was, what a shame that at this huge gathering of people, so many of whom have a similar goal or a similar interest, there should be some kind of organized way to step into the pool and meet some people. So we proposed the idea to the programming department, and they liked it. They thought it was a good idea too. They'd been actually had a similar idea in mind for a while, and they let us run with it. They let us try it out and run with it. And the very first time we did it, this is a story I share all the time because it was so funny. We had an ordinary programming room, so all the chairs were in theater style seating facing the front. They weren't able to give us the tables that we'd asked for, so we had theater style seating. And Corey and I had worked out ahead of time plan A if we had about 50-50 writers and artists, and a plan B if it was like 1/3, 2/3. We expected there to be more writers, so we thought if it's 2/3 writers, 1/3 artists, we'll put them in trios and let them interact a little bit. And we had this whole seating plan for how they would shift seats and things like that. And we started off, we probably had over 100 people that came. It was great. Wow. And we started off by saying, raise your hand if you're a writer. And almost all these hands shot up. And we sort of counted them. And then we said, raise your hand if you're an artist. And one hand went up in the air. And we just turned to each other and laughed like we had no idea what to do. So we started having people turn to each other and answer some questions and get to know each other a little bit.
Yeah.
And more artists trickled in as it went. But ever since then, we've gotten more and more balanced. And in fact, we've started to have versions now where we're about the same number
Wow.
of writers and artists, and that's great. Everyone gets to meet 10 or 15 or 20 people by the end of the night. It's great.
Yeah, we when we went, it was like 2-to-1 writers to artists.
Yeah.
And we would have and it's sort of like, if someone hasn't done it before, it's sort of like speed dating. You got like 3 minutes with the person, trying to impress them with what you have and look at their stuff at the same time and hopefully make a connection. Which we never did, actually. We went to 4 of them, one at WonderCon that you weren't hosting, but we never could actually connect with anybody. There's always that the first person you sit down with, we were there for like 15 minutes where everybody's settling in and stuff, and you think you make this connection with this guy or gal and or girl, and you don't, you realize that because there was every time we like fell in love with the person we were sitting with at the beginning, and we contacted them and they never were interested in what we were doing. So it just, as it turned out, or they were, I already got a job, or I already got this, or whatever.
Yeah, that was probably just bad luck on our part.
We're not blaming you. We're just saying that it was just the way it worked. But I mean, I remember the first time we went, we would go to Comic-Con like at 5 a.m. to get in line for stuff. And then your thing was like at the end of the day, and then after that we got dinner, and we were like, you said to contact 3 people that you met, and I remember struggling with this guy's email address because the name was a little complicated, and I must have messed it up like 3 or 4 times, but I finally got it done and sent it off, and then I never heard from the person again. It's like I was like really tired. 11 o'clock at night.
Those are long days, aren't they?
They were, yeah. So obviously we did not go to the first one because we did have tables and all that, and I guess we were kind of lucky as we were kind of 2 against 1 because Paul could sit there and look through their portfolio, and I'd be talking about Power Squared and that kind of stuff.
Right.
We did.
Well, I'm wondering if do you mind if I ask you questions back?
Sure, go ahead. It's supposed to be a conversation. It's a conversation, so you can ask questions.
Good. Well, I'm curious. I love hearing the stories of how people got started and where you found bumps and what you had to push through. And I know you guys had a lot of bumps up in the beginning because you would come and talk to me at each convention and ask me a question. How do we get through this? How do we get through this? So I'm curious. You went to Comic Creator Connection. You weren't able to connect with anybody that was interested. What were your next steps? What did you do to get through that?
Well, actually, we did connect with somebody I think the 3rd time.
Yeah.
And it was a woman, and she was local. She lived in Burbank, so it was really convenient for us. And we met with her a couple of times, and we actually had, we thought we were kind of moving forward, and then she kind of got involved in a relationship and got a job, and then we could never get a hold of her. We had eventually to sort of walk away because it was never going to happen. And what we ended up doing was, it's kind of a long story. There was at the WonderCon one we went to, there was an artist that was going to a panel, he was going to be on a panel, so he couldn't do the connection, but he went around and handed out cards to everybody in a little packet of stuff as kind of examples of his work. And when we went in, he was the most professional person that was there at that one, because a lot of them weren't prepared, or they didn't have anything to show you, or whatever, for whatever reason. And so we thought about contacting him because and he's, I think, out of Sacramento. So we had tried to, instead of thinking of it as a series, do a one-shot, which was called And Eli at the time, and we sent that to him, and he didn't like it, and thought we were screwing up the whole superhero thing or whatever. It wasn't very flattering about it. So we rewrote it again and thought, well, let's try him again. And I noticed on his Facebook, he was part of a Facebook Comic Creator Connection thing there, kind of a Facebook group that did the same sort of thing. So we went there and looking for people, and we found, I want to say there was 4 or 5 people that got back to us, and then we sent them, gave them access to a page of the script and said, please, draw this. And one person kind of sketched something on the back. It looked like on the back of the, printed out the page and sort of sketched something on the back. And then somebody, Sika, did a sort of a professional presentation. He inked it and everything, and it was its own. It wasn't just a sketch on the back of the paper. He actually drew it, and so we hired him. And we used him for the first 5 issues, which is part of the graphic novel that we're on the Kickstarter. We decided we wanted to, spend more money, so let's get it colored. And so we went on to the same group. We thought we found the colorist was he kind of had kind of illuminated things a certain way. We thought that might be cool for the powers when they use them. And we were wrong.
It didn't turn out how you wanted.
We did 2 issues with him, and at the time we had made a connection with Chip Mosier at Comixology.
Yeah.
And because I know for a while I know they were sponsoring there was sort of an avenue, wasn't there?
Right.
Between the two of you, and we had. I connected with him on the email and actually met him at the next Comic-Con and kind of had a little bit of a chit chat with him, and so we sent him the first 2 issues, and it was also the first issue that Trevor had ever lettered.
Yeah.
And so we were just gonna see what he said, and he goes, the story's okay, the art's all right, the lettering could be a little better, but you need to get a colorist. And so we were like, okay, and how do we do that without telling this guy, let this guy know we're looking, kind of a deal. And so he set us up with the Savannah College of Art and Design, a couple of professors there he contacted.
Yeah.
And they said, we have 3 or 4 people that, would possibly be good candidates. And we were talking to 3 or 4 of them. One of them was in China. They have a campus in China. We were just trying to maybe not have it a long distance because Sika was in Indonesia, I think, and the colorist we had was in the Philippines, and we were never talking to these people. We thought at least if they were maybe closer, we'd be in the same time zone or whatever. So we were talking with this, and they had this really exaggerated idea of how much we could spend to color a page because they all wanted like $100 a page, and we're like, okay, we're not paying the artist that much. And we finally found actually the roommate or the friend of somebody that we were trying to hire wanted to do it, so we hired him, Rory, and he did the first 2 issues and then decided that he wanted to do something else. And so he put us in touch with Paige Redbird, who was also from SCAD, and who we'd actually just met a few weeks ago. Finally, we had her on the show because we never actually, I
was watching that episode, so I saw your conversation with her.
So we hired her, and she did 3 issues and decided she wanted to do something else. We're like, are we like ruining people for coloring? And she put us in touch with Nina Gaylord, who was another SCAD graduate, and she also helped us find. We were sort of thinking that we were had run our course with Sika and wanted sort of a different style and a different discipline maybe, because it was kind of like those last few pages would trickle in over like a month or something. We were like, we're ready to finish this thing.
Yeah, sure.
And so they helped. So we've hired Rachel Wells, who is also a SCAD graduate, and Rachel's still with us. We're working on issue 21 with her at the moment. So, and then Nina did it colored until issue 13.
Yeah.
And then we hired Julia Cannon, who's sort of a local friend of a friend kind of a thing, who's also a good artist, and she agreed to do it.
Yeah.
And so we've been using her. We're actually, hopefully this year, going to actually put out stuff that she's done. It's been a couple of years. But anyway, so that's kind of where we are.
I'm always so inspired every time I see you guys or hear from you. Because this has not been a short journey for you. This has been a long journey and a tremendous amount of work pushing through all these obstacles. And you guys have been so resilient with, we have a thing we want to put out in the world, and we're going to keep pushing until we do it. And so how many years has it been since you started on the first book?
I want to say we probably wrote the first script. I even wrote a little history.
I was going to say, define start.
Yeah, because we had the idea a couple of years before we actually got around to finding an artist.
Okay.
Or look for an artist. I think we originally thought Trevor might draw it, but it wasn't something he wanted to. He's also an artist, but he didn't want to do it.
Well, he didn't think he was he didn't think he could deliver what we were looking for.
Okay, so then that's when we started. We should look around and find somebody, and then the Comic Creator Connection thing came up. But it was, I guess, I want to say it might be like close to 10 years.
Yeah.
since we wrote the first script for it.
From the inception.
Inception of it, yeah. We had the idea to do it, and it took a little while to put together the story, and we actually drew the original storyboards. I drew them out, and they're great artwork. And and then basically the first issue kind of ended up being pretty close to what we drew. But, and then we talked to people that were kind of more knowledgeable than we were about it and stuff, but we didn't really find an artist until we found Sika.
Yeah.
So if you could go back to that first year when you first earnestly started making the comic, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I wish we knew to build what the biggest thing we have, the problem we have is nobody knows we're doing it, and they tell you to sort of, I don't know how you actually do this, but build a fan base before you,
Yeah.
And we're like, I don't know how you do that, because we don't have like a lot of art we could share. People don't, here's a story I wrote, I think artists have it a little easier because you have something visual and people can look at it and go, yeah, it's great. And they don't have to like spend a lot of time delving into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think it's harder for writers to do it. I think artists have a little bit of and especially if you can, there are some people that can draw and write in letter and color, and they just are like little one-man shops, and they have it all over. I think people like us, because we're depending on somebody to look at it and decide. And we have a little process we've worked out with Rachel, and she does like 2 sets of thumbnails for every page. And we go down and go, okay, we like this panel here, and we like the rest of the panels on this page. And so she sometimes has to flip things because, the 180-degree axis. And so it's a lot of, if it's a lot of extra layers to get it out the door, I guess. And it's expensive at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah. So, it's... so I guess I wish we could have somehow built a fan base before we started doing it. But I don't know what that secret sauce would have been to do it. And I don't know obviously we don't know what the secret sauce is. People are reading.
We don't know secret sauce now.
Years later, we're still, we're kind of hoping that people eventually will discover it, and there'll be all this stuff we've been doing. They'll go, hey, all these shows I can listen to or whatever.
Yeah, you guys have so many episodes on YouTube. I was scrolling through them and watching a few. I really liked the one on how to write a comic book script. It was this little short 5-minute episode, but you pulled in some really useful examples all at once, and I loved it. I thought that was really helpful. But impressive how many resources you put up there, and how we make the book, your critique sessions, your team meetings, things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Well, I think we're committed to doing it. I mean, a lot of people do a couple of podcasts and, it's a lot of work, and they stop doing it. Or it just gets to be, they can't schedule it, or they're busy at 6:00 on Friday night.
Sure. Yeah.
Which has been good for us. I mean, the pandemic kind of helped us I was home on Fridays, so it kind of made it easier to do it on Fridays and kind of, get it over with before the weekend starts. Because I think it'd be harder to get people to, 2:00 on a Saturday. So we've been doing, we did a week in Power Squared for a while on Sundays, and we would do this show too, and we decided, that's too much. And so
let's just do this.
Yeah. So we're committed to, I guess, punishment or something, because we keep doing it, over and over again.
That's great.
Yeah. So, how often do people actually connect through the creator connection?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I wouldn't say that we always hear about it. We do at Comic-Con. We haven't the last couple years because of the pandemic, but
right.
we're hoping to again. We offer a Comic Creator Connection All Stars panel,
right,
where we encourage people who got together and made something to let us know about it, and then we'll sort of select from the applications that come in and put them up on a panel. And the few years that we've done that, we had at least 4 groups each time. So that's us able to point at 4 pieces of work that are in the world now because of the Comic Creator Connection. And it's more than that. Not everybody. We're not able to take all of the ones that come in, and some of them repeat. There's groups that, gosh, they pick up a new writer every year, it seems, and they do another project, and they'll put together another issue of something that they'll submit. So we know that there's a handful probably every year where they meet and they start working together.
Because one of our goals for doing the comic book was to be on a panel. That's never happened. Because we thought it'd be kind of cool to be on the side.
I'll tell you, getting a panel, especially at a place like WonderCon, is easier than most people think. You submit an application with your idea for what the panel is going to be about, and then as they're building the schedule, they go through and select all the ones that they can fit. And Comic-Con is pretty full. Like they take a lot of legacy panels. Like this panel happens every year, and so there's not a lot of space for new panels. But WonderCon has more space than you would think, and I think they have more rooms to play with than at Comic-Con. They've kind of reached maximum capacity. They can't add any more spaces. They're even using the library and things like that now at Comic-Con. So it's a lot harder to sneak in there. But come up with a good pitch, and you can. You can get on the list.
Well, I think we were hoping to be on somebody else's panel.
Oh, sure.
But no one says, "Hey, who hasn't really made it? You come up." Were you a big comic book reader, or is this just you kind of fell into this because of Comic-Con, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, Corey, my husband, grew up a comic book reader since he was 5 years old, and he has a massive comic book collection, and he knows it is the golden age of the Marvel Cinematic Universe for him right now. Everything is, he can't believe that these characters he grew up with are coming to life now. When I was a kid, I read G.I. Joe. It's a comic for, I don't know, about 20, maybe 30 issues was about my run with G.I. Joe. And a neighbor gave us a shoebox once that had a bunch of old comic books in it. And I found one of them was an Amazing Spider-Man comic, and it was the first appearance of the Spider clone. And I didn't know until much later that that's a fairly valuable comic right now. And I just this year became a comic book collector because Corey helped me hunt down, and I have it right here actually. I'm going to show you. He helped me hunt down a copy of that first issue of Spider-Man that I read. And I must have read that issue like 20 times. It was tattered, and I knew every word of that story, and I just loved it. And that was until I met Corey in college. That was about all I had read of comics. And then when I met Corey, he started introducing me to comics slowly. And since I had a curated experience, he only brought me great comics. So one day he brought me a stack this high of Uncanny X-Men comics, and they were the John Byrne, Chris Claremont, Uncanny X-Men. And I sat in my dorm room and over a weekend, just devoured all them. And then he turned me on to Alpha Flight, and then Sandman was coming out at the time, and and there were just a lot of really good comics coming out then, and so he got me into it then as we got together. So my relationship to comics is much newer than his. His goes into the marrow of his bones. Mine's much newer. Yeah, but I love it. I love the aspect of comics that it is such a collaborative medium. I absolutely love that about comics. That's so fun to me. That the final product that's produced isn't something that one person in the group could have done on their own. It's everyone brought something to the soup, and you come up with something that's great afterwards. And I love reading about the early days of Marvel Comics and DC Comics and how it was that then too. It was a writer and an artist and a colorist and an inker and a letterer, and they might have all worked in the same office or not. They might have been FedExing copies of things around, and I love that aspect of the medium.
It is collaborative, and one of the things I think we enjoy about Rachel actually, studied sequential art, which is, she kind of knows how to tell a story. We're just okay, and so she will make suggestions that usually improve things.
Yeah.
So you get to learn from working with her as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. It's
That's
you're always
great.
learning something.
How about you two? What are your relationships to comics as a medium?
I think I've been more into comics than since I was like in middle school or high school. I've been reading like a lot of manga, the Japanese comics, and in like high school and college I read I read some American comics as well. One of my favorites was Deadpool, because I think he's a surprisingly deep character for such a silly.
You took a class in college, you and Trevor, about comic books, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see. At this point with comics, I still read like American comics, you could say, but I've been more into like the independent stuff. Like I really got into Lock and Key.
Oh, sure. Yep.
And Trevor he recently really got into Usagi Yojimbo. And he also devoured Bone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Love Bone.
And with manga, I still keep up with like One Piece, is how long that's been running. But I've also gotten to stuff like Way of the House Husband or Tamamo-chan is a Fox.
When they were in high school, a comic book store opened at least about a block away from our house. And they started
that's dangerous.
Yeah. And they started going there all the time. And I would go in there, with them. And, like, if you're not reading something, it's really not that exciting to be in the, you're just, like, looking at a bunch of stuff. So I started reading. And I was a little more, Captain America and Captain Marvel and some, Arrow and some other stuff here and there.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the Saga.
Yeah.
So I kind of, and then, so I came sort of late into the picture. I wasn't really, when I was a kid, there weren't a comic book store near where I lived, and they sold them in the supermarkets, and my mother was like, "Hey, we can't afford that." Like it was 12 cents or something. How things are. And so I just sort of didn't really have that experience, but I sort of, and then I read kind of if I get something through a Kickstarter or something. I don't have a lot of time with just spare time between working, the job that pays me, and the comic book and some other writing, and it's just sort of I have a limited amount of time I can spend reading. So
sure.
I'm not an avid comic book consumer, I'm afraid.
I feel like mentioning Comic-Con actually gave me one of the coolest experiences when it came to comics. So one of my favorite series is Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is a card game series. Okay. And so that's by the mangaka for that is Kazuki Takahashi, and one year at Comic-Con I got to meet him.
Yeah. He
Nice.
He has to sign a piece, both of them do.
Yeah, signed a
That's great.
There were these art boards made specifically for that signing. So he not only signed it, but our names were written in Japanese.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
One thing I like about Comic-Con is you get exposed to things you wouldn't necessarily think you were planning on getting exposed to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We went to see it was Type Kubo.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, you sometimes have to get in like panels 2 or 3 ahead of time to get into the panel
sure.
you want to get into. And we ended up being in one about watching The Watchmen, and honestly had like, what is this? And so I read
the HBO series.
No, it was a book about the comic books.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Because the Zack Snyder movie was in development.
And so I read all the all the Watchmen. I got it signed by the artist at Comic-Con. Yeah, at Comic-Con. And I have the original set. I actually was given those as gifts by my family, and from the local comic book store, and got into the was it after the Watchmen thing? I forgot what they called it.
Was that before Watchmen?
Well, before, yeah. They did a series before Watchmen, so I read, got into that, and but I wouldn't have been exposed to it if we weren't waiting to see another panel. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
yeah, you just encounter all of these random molecules of creative expression at Comic-Con. And, trying to get seats for a next thing exposes you to something cool. And I love that too. We talk about that all the time because we'll go into panels that we don't have any interest in and wait.
But sometimes you just
discover things that way too.
There was I want to say we were waiting to see. I want to say maybe I'm making this up. I thought it was Doom Foray, and one of the panels before that was about Dracula and or vampires and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, okay, and it got me interested. So I read Dracula, because of that and stuff. So I mean, you can't just get exposed to stuff you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Which is that is one of the cool aspects of it. Let's talk a little bit about Epic Win.
The book, yeah, sure.
Yeah, which you published in 2014. And I realized, I'll let you talk about it, but I realized I read it, I think, pretty soon after you published it. Because one of the things in the book, you talked about assembling your team, which I didn't feel like I really had that. So I want to say it was the scorekeeper or something. So I started doing a blog about my writing to sort of keep myself, kind of self scorekeep or whatever. What am I doing? And what's my experience? And I've been doing that now for 400 weeks. I do it weekly, so it's 400 weeks. So it's about 8 years ago. I started doing it based on having read your book. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
We don't know when.
And so the blog is kind of a way of keeping yourself honest. I'm accountable to this step every week.
Yeah.
No matter what.
What have I done? What are my thoughts? If I learned something at Comic-Con, I'll write about that, or WonderCon. I'll write about what I learned and try to share that information. I'll kind of talk about what I should have done, what I haven't done. I think last week I was kind of bitter about the Kickstarter, but. So it's my experience in that week. So I call it a week in writing, and so I've been doing it for 400 weeks based on kind of on your book. Even though your book doesn't say to do that, but that was my way of keeping myself honest.
Yeah. I think the way you describe it would be the coach.
Okay.
We said in the book that the coach is the one who keeps you honest to your goals. The scorekeeper is more about the quality of your work.
Okay.
And telling you when you might need to redo that page, you might need to do another draft, things like that. But having some kind of accountability partner like that, and I love how you created one that there's going to be a place where I publish this to the world once a week, and 400 weeks. That's amazing.
Yeah, and there's 10 or 12 people that read it every week, so it's not, again, can't catch on, but. Anyway, so it's something I do is sort of okay, what have I done, what I haven't done, and it's sort of a good reflection on Sunday afternoon to sit down and kind of go, okay, what should I have done, what I haven't done. He actually edits it for me, so he's been involved for 8 years of reading it, but yeah.
That's great.
I got foggy here.
That's great. I love hearing that. Yeah.
So tell us about how did this book come about?
Well, in the first couple of chapters of the book, we kind of tell the story. The first year that Corey and I went to Comic-Con was, oh gosh, it's going to hurt to say this, but it was 2006. And we went there with some friends of ours. We went there with our friend Adam, who he and his friends were working on a comic that they wanted to produce. And at the time, Corey was an aspiring filmmaker. And my thing was getting in front of groups, public speaking, being a motivational speaker. And I wasn't doing it. I wasn't creating any kinds of audiences for myself. So the three of us all had these creative goals that we wanted to accomplish, and we were all stuck. And when you have something like that in you, and you go to a place like Comic-Con, there's a lot of joy at Comic-Con because you see things that you love and you get to experience the fandom. And there's also some aching that happens inside because you have your own thing that you want to get out. And we all felt that. We all felt like, I want to have a booth, or I want to have a film that someone's looking at, or I want to have a comic sign, And so I left Comic-Con with that, and as I would talk with Corey about it, I kept wanting to find a way to bring those stories together. And I had some training experience in coaching, helping people get past their blocks and things like that. And I thought Comic-Con could use something like that, because I had a feeling that the three of us weren't the only ones that were suffering from that. So I kind of cyber stalked the director of programming at the time, and I found an email address for him, and I emailed him and I said, hey, I want to do this panel at Comic-Con. And this was back before Comic-Con used to sell out. This is
Right.
Where tickets would sell out. This was not the big Comic-Con that is today. And so he said, yeah, sure, we'll give you a spot on the schedule. And so we made this workshop, this 1 hour goal setting workshop, and we framed it around 10 magic coins that you could use on your journey to bringing your project to life. And then we did that at Comic-Con and then WonderCon, and we did that every year for a while. And we kept refining it. We kept coming up with more coins, more ways to tell that story. We started coaching people. But 2 years after that, we had Adam. He and his friends had finished their comic. They published it, and they had a booth at Comic-Con that year. And Corey had finished his first short film that was out in the world. He did a music video, like a long-form music video for a local musician. And I had this workshop. And so the three of us had all reached this goal. And that really inspired me to want to turn that experience into a book. And a book would also give us the opportunity to expand on the 10 things, because there were so many more to talk about. You just don't have time in a 50-minute workshop. And so I started collecting them. I started 15 minutes before work every morning. I would sit down and force myself to write, and then try to make it like 30 minutes. And you all know how that goes. You get to a really rough, terrible first draft, and I decided for Valentine's one year, I went up to one of the self-publishing sites, and I had my first draft bound into a copy of a book, and I gave that to Corey for Valentine's Day, and I said, I want us to edit this together and publish it for real, and I left it on my desk overnight. And our cat at the time, her name is Mira, she's not with us anymore, but she in the morning, she had left her feedback on the book. She had a hairball, coughed up a big hairball on the book, and so that was the feedback that this needs some more work.
Right.
So we spent the next year or so editing. Every Saturday we would sit down in a restaurant. We'd spread out, and we'd camp out in a booth for hours talking through chapters. I'd be doing a draft, and Corey would be reading it, and then we'd go paragraph through paragraph trying to refine it and things like that, until we published. And that was kind of the journey to that book. But it really started with that, the heartache of that first year at Comic-Con, and wanting to put something out in the world that would help.
Right.
And that's the core of all. We started a company around it called Toucan Learning, and that's been the core of that. And today, what we mostly do is the Comic Creator Connection and the All-Star Panel. And both of those things, the purpose for doing those is to help with some part of that process. So if we can help you find someone to work with, that's great. If you found someone to work with, created something, and we can help put you on a panel, that's great too. Occasionally we do some other things at conventions too, but it's all around that core idea.
I like the book because again, I read at night usually before I go to bed, and the chapters are I could get through a chapter every night.
Oh yeah.
So it was easy. Like I'm making progress on those, and a lot of it is it's very common sense.
Yeah.
You should be doing this. And I had quoted to somebody one time about the idea that people go to work early and stay late, and you're making that company's dreams come true, not your own, or something like along those lines. And I was like, yeah, that makes a certain amount of sense. I mean, one of the things I do like about working from home when I can, I have to go in 2 days a week now, but is at the end of the day, I'm home. I don't have to drive. In LA, it's an hour and a half drive home, and it's just a time suck you're losing. And so I enjoy the fact that I can just like kind of turn the page quicker, and get into something I want to do, and not be so worn out about it. But
yes.
So there's a lot of good. I mean, there's a lot of I think kind of common sense things to do. And you do talk about a team, which again I didn't think I could assemble, so I kind of went out and made my own. But no, I think it's a really good book. Now.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're referred to here on as the Tony Robbins of geeks.
Geeks, yeah.
Is that something you're still? I mean, Tony Robbins kind of his reputation's kind of gone down a little over the years, but
yeah, I think what ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to be that kind of a speaker. High energy in front of a crowd, and I've always felt. I've always felt more. I have greater situational awareness. I have greater connection with the room, with my content when I'm in front of an audience. That is my my body's happy place. And we had a friend. He's the one who said that. Gene Yang, who's skyrocketed to stardom ever since then. But he used to be. We used to be teachers together at a high school, and we had him as a guest at our workshop once. He came up and talked about writing one of his first graphic novel and answered some questions about it. And afterwards, we went out. We visited him at his booth afterwards, just to thank him for being on the workshop. And he said, "Doug, you're the Tony Robbins of geeks," and it kind of stuck. And I think it's an accessible way for people to understand what they're reading. The idea is that this is a performance coach for someone who's a nerd, and everything in that book is going to be nerdy, and it's going to resonate with folks who live in that world. And that was sort of the parameters we put around it when we wrote it.
Did you have a panel about this book? Because I remember hearing some of these stories about your friends and you're working through all this together, kind of a thing. That not through the Comic Creator Connection, but okay. So I guess I attended.
Yeah, we did a panel. We call it a workshop. It was just me taking the room through like these 10 magic coins, these 10 tips, and I would always start with that story about Corey and Adam and I.
So now, I was going to ask the question. You and Corey are married. Was it a lot of people can't work with I can work with my spouse, but a lot of people can't. Was that an interesting situation for you, or you always have been working together, so it wasn't a big deal, or?
Sure. I think we've always creatively worked together in some capacity, and the stakes are higher when you're working with a spouse because you can't walk away from that spouse relationship,
right?
So you have to work harder to take care of things, to clean things up when you make mistakes. And I wouldn't say that I was perfect at it. I would say I learned a lot, and in the end, we had a great time. Yeah. We were really proud of the book we produced. We made up a name for it. Generally my role in that process was banging out a bad first draft, and I can type pretty fast, so those come out, just pour out of my head.
Right.
And Corey is much more of a thoughtful writer, and he would go through, well, this paragraph doesn't line up with this one, and this doesn't make sense because of what you said back over here. And so those Saturdays in the sitting in a booth at a restaurant were us refining that writing down together. So we we referred to his role as wedditor, like an editor that I was wedded to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of our ways of talking about it. That was how we approached the partnership on that book. But it was something we wrote together, and we had a great time. Yeah.
So I always ask these people and have them on the show. You've actually read Power Squared, I believe, several years ago.
It was a long time ago, but I do remember reading it. Yeah.
And what did you think of Power Squared? I'll put you on the spot here.
Well, you can't read Power Squared if you know you guys and not think of Paul and Trevor.
Right.
So I'm always thinking as I'm reading through this, how much of this is real, is how you guys are with each other, and how much of it is wishful thinking. I wish it was more like this, or how much of it is you working stuff out. I think that's really an interesting aspect of it. Yeah, you do have the powers, but you can't play guitar.
Yeah, it's sort of an idealized version of them. We were trying to come up with, the idea was to make identical twins the heroes of a story as opposed to the gimmick characters or the background characters. And they were, I want to say you were in college at the time we started doing this. So let's have it start in college, and what would happen how would these twins get these powers? And they were into manga, so we wanted to bring in some of that into it. That's where we came up with Mocha, giving them the powers, and why would you give them powers? We had to sort of think through everything. So that we try to give them some of the same interests that they had, but it's not really writing from you don't have the experiences of the book are
right
fictional. So, and we wanted it to be not be living with their parents, so we had to be with their fun uncle, and we've sort of developed some backstory. Well, which we haven't got to yet. A little backstory about the parents and stuff. So it's a little bit of them, but mostly it's fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys are working on issue number what now?
21.
Issue 21. That's amazing.
Yeah, we're gluttons for pain. We like being ignored, so if we keep doing it, more people will ignore us. No. Yeah.
That brought up a question for me. How do you, Epic Win was all about goal setting, taking something from being a fan to having kind of a wish and a dream to bringing it into life. And you've done that.
Yeah.
More than once. And I'm curious about how you think about goals for Power Squared, short-term goals and long-term goals, and how you work with that. Do you have those mapped out somewhere? Do you have we want to produce 100 issues and that's when it'll be done? Or do you have a chart in the family room with X's on it for your goals? How do you think about short and long-term goals for Power Squared?
Well, we're always hoping that we'll find more readers, and so it's been hard 2020 was going to be the year we were going to break out. We had we had a signing scheduled for Golden Apple Comics in Hollywood. The Saturday after they shut everything down, so we missed out on that.
Oh wow!
And then we rescheduled that for, I think it was Batman Day or something in September.
Yeah.
And by the time it just we got a few nibbles here and there, but it wasn't the success you hoped for. And it just sort of we got kind of I guess waylaid. Because we were going to try to we did one signing before up at the local comic book store, and we did a little con in the valley here, which wasn't really designed for people with a new comic book they were trying to get people to read. It was more designed for, I'm collecting comics, and we actually ironically met, I would say, maybe our biggest fan there. She was there promoting a movie that she had been in, sort of I want to say kind of a low budget movie.
Yeah.
and she was the star of a series of these little films, and she was there and sitting across the aisle from us, and she came over, I assume taking pity on us, and said, "What do you have?" And so she bought a couple of issues, and she's been kind of backing us ever since. Sue Price, I'll give her name out, and we've had her on the show, and she has a following of people, because that was our biggest, as far as people viewing it, our biggest show.
Yeah.
But she's been very nice to us and stuff. So you can meet people that like your stuff in
Sure.
environment where it wasn't designed for it. But we just haven't really. I mean, there's not a lot of money in it to do a con, because it costs to get a table, and you have to have stuff. And we were talking with an artist, Don Wynn, who did a lot of conventions last year, and he was saying, "Oh, you should do a convention, blah blah blah." How do you make the money back from it's $800 for a table? How do you make money on that, or whatever? I don't know how much it is per se. But he does commissions because he's an artist. Well, we're not going to sit there and do commissions. Let me type out something for you. It's kind of like, it would just be it would be a big expense, and we're kind of doing this on a kind of a shoestring kind of, it's all coming out, it's all out of pocket. So I don't want to spend more money than we can afford, and get one person to buy a comic book or whatever. So, so it's been hard for us to kind of get. We need to figure out how to get more out in front of people, but it's hard to actually. I think, being that we're not artists, it makes it a little more difficult. I'm sure there are people that have great success and all that, but.
Well, I think there's a million different stories of how people get there, and you're finding your own. I saw that your Kickstarter was fully funded this last week, and this isn't your first Kickstarter, right?
No, and it's kind of a interesting story. It's we did a Kickstarter 2.5 years ago. We're one of the people that publish us on demand is a company called artithmeric.com. They're out of London, and they were suggesting a couple years ago that we do a graphic novel, put the first 5 issues together and have a graphic novel. So we thought that was a good idea, and we were trying to raise some money if we could, and so let's kickstart the graphic novel. It's already done, so it's not like a lot of it was easy to turn it around. And we used another Kablam for some of the single issues, because it was less expensive for us, and they actually fulfilled it for us. And so we did this Kickstarter, and we hit up everybody. It was kind of I think we kicked it off in November and Thanksgiving, and we hit up everybody in the family, and they all backed it. So we did pretty well. My mother backed it as well. And we raised, we set a goal like $3,000 or something, and we made it. Not by a whole lot, but we did make it. And so when they approached us about doing this Kickstarter again for the graphic novel, I was like, okay, for us, we kind of hit up everybody that we'd expect to back it. So it's kind of like, okay, and so the goal of this is to translate it into French, and then to sell it as a bande dessinée.
Bande dessinée.
Okay, in France and I guess French-speaking Belgium, where apparently graphic novels are readily available. They're like in all the stores. It's not like you go to a specific store to get it or whatever. And they think that's a market potentially, and they want to use the money that they raise to translate it into French. And so so we decided to try to do something different. We went back and kind of we know that the first 5 issues are kind of wordy and all that, so let's see if we could sort of sharpen them up a little bit. So we went through, it's like 100 pages, and made changes pretty much on every page. Yeah. Because Trevor had to re-letter it, and it was like 4 or 5 pages.
Special edition.
Yeah. So we did that, and so we tried to make it at least different if you hadn't read it before. If you had read it before, it'd be a slightly different read for you, hopefully improved. We just finally made it over the finish line. We have like 4 days to go or whatever, but we're at least over the. So we've successfully funded
Good for
2
you.
Kickstarters. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And I won't get into my whole my kind of bitchy post last week, but it kind of, it makes you kind of, you realize this is where people decide if they like your project, and like you kind of, it's, you're putting yourself out there, and it's feeling like if you don't fund, nobody, we're not doing this for the joy of doing a comic book. We're doing it for partly, but we're also doing it to help people read it. And you want people to, in my blog every week, I mention Power Squared, what's going on with it, and I don't think that's necessarily translated into sales or anything like that. But I want people. The whole point of writing is to get people to read what you've written. So I'm trying to always kind of push that forward, and hopefully, somebody will go, hey, you know what? I'll give it a chance or whatever. And we've tried to design kind of because it takes place at a school. We have of course these little T-shirts we've come up with, but we've also to follow us, you enroll at the school, San Ramiro Community College, and we do a sort of a newsletter once a month called The Hound Dogs Howl, and it's sort of like the school paper. It's actually from the comic book, and so we kind of have at least a little bit in there about heard around campus kind of stuff and things like that. So we're trying to make it a little bit of flavored of idealized going to school, because I haven't taken classes or anything, but so we're hoping that at some point that it does catch on.
Yeah.
I think what you're speaking to is one of the universal challenges of the artist or the creative person is the difference between expressing yourself and commercial success. And those two things have almost nothing to do with each other. And, the universe doesn't make any promises. And I love this book by Elizabeth Gilbert, Big Magic. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but she talks about the creative life. And Elizabeth Gilbert wrote that book, Eat, Pray, Love, which became one of the best-selling books in the world, skyrocketed to #1 on the New York Times bestseller list for years. And she had no control over that. And she has just as many books that she's written that nobody's read,
right?
And she has some acclaim now because she's been on Oprah, she's been but
the author
but before
of
that she was much more unknown. And she writes this in this book, Big Magic. She writes about the relationship between you and the creative muse, and the idea that comes to you is essentially knocking on the door and saying, hey, I want to be expressed. I want to be out in the world and be born. You want to walk this path with me. And if you sign up for that idea, then that's a partnership, and you get to, like we did when we wrote Epic Win, we got to bring this book into existence. And she said, you get a nice artifact out of that. You get a thing. You get a book or an object that you made, but that's the end of the deal. There's no other promise made by the universe, and that's really hard because like you said, that there's a vulnerability to that you're putting yourself out there in the shop window for the people to walk by, and it's a part of you that's out there. And everyone, I've talked to so many people at Comic-Con and conventions and stuff who come up to me with the same challenge of getting okay with that. I'll tell you a quick story, if you don't mind. When we first published Epic Win, that very first Comic-Con, we had gotten ourselves a small press table. So we had paid the money. We had built graphics. So we had a tablecloth printed with our logo. We had a banner behind us. We had books to sell, hardcover and softcover, and it was time to place the order for the books. And I said, I think we should order about 250 copies, because we're there for 4 days, and there's going to be a lot of people that really want this, and it would be the worst thing to run out.
Right.
because we would have paid all this money to go and run out. I said, I think we should order 250 copies. And Corey looked at me, and he was very, very compassionate to me. But he said, Doug, I love you. I want you to hear this, though. We're not going to sell 250 copies. And I said, yes, we are. It's going to be great. People are going to be lined up. They're going to love it. There's people that come to our workshop. They're going to come right down to our booth, and they're going to want autographs, and they're going to buy books. And preview night came. And if you haven't been to Comic-Con before, for your audience, preview night is 6 to 9 p.m., the day before Comic-Con starts, when only the exhibit hall is open.
Right.
So that's all people come there to do, is to shop. And we had our booth set up for the very first time. It was crisp, clean. It was sparkling. We had stacks of books. We brought probably 50 or 100 books down just for preview night, under the table, ready to go. And we had a stack on the table. And I think we sold 3 books that night. Really. And
Yeah.
I was heartbroken. That was really hard to swallow that. And by the end of Comic-Con, I think maybe we had sold 20. But really small number. And I came to learn after that you sort of need both of those voices if you're gonna do this work, if you're gonna put out creative work. You need a voice in you that says, this could be really great and people would really like this. This has value. And you need someone inside of you, a voice that's saying, yeah, this is gonna be, they're gonna line up and they're gonna buy my book. You have to have that voice because it'll sustain you. And you also have to have the other voice, the voice that says, Doug, I love you, but they're not going to buy 250 books, and that will bring you down to reality, and it'll also sustain you because it'll explain afterwards, why did we only sell 3 books? I don't understand. And I would have given up after that. Like, nobody wants this. This is garbage, But you have to have kind of those 2 voices in your head always, cheering you on, and then level setting with you, and that's something that everybody walks. So I just want to say again how much I respect you guys for keeping pushing on this and looking for openings wherever you can find them, and keep putting yourself out into the world. Mad respect for that.
We and it was interesting you said that, because I remember we were talking to some artist, and he was saying, oh, I have my books printed here, and you get a break at 1,000 or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I don't want a garage full of comic books that I didn't sell. So we order small amounts whenever we do something. And I like the idea that they're print on demand. You can go get them yourself if you really want it, that kind of stuff. So I don't want a garage full of, that's issue 1. We used to park a car here. That's issue 2. Anyway, it's been great having you on the show. If somebody wants to follow you or get your advice or whatever, how would they best contact you?
They could contact me through Twitter, at ToucanDoug. I'm on Twitter. That's probably the best, most public way to get a hold of me. And if they want to find a copy of the book, all I have with me here is a hardcover reverse edition. This was a special limited edition we created. But the paperback is still available on Amazon. If they search Epic Win and Doug Neff, they'll find it on Amazon.
Are you still?
It's print on demand, so they can get copies of it.
Are you still selling them at Comic-Con?
Sometimes we'll bring them with us to. We don't do a booth anymore.
Right.
So we'll usually have a few copies in our bag if someone wants to buy one.
Yeah. I know that's how Trevor went to one of your programs, and you guys were talking about the book, so he bought it. He got it signed by the 2 of you.
We had a few with us. Yeah.
Anyway, well, it's been nice having you on the show. Appreciate it. Maybe we can have you back at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to. This was great.
So if you're watching this on YouTube later and you like this conversation and you want to see more, leave a like and subscribe and consider ringing that bell.
All right. So until next time, I'm David Hankins.
I'm Paul Hankins.
And you've been on the air with Power Squared.